$200.
That's a lot.
We used to have a contest at my old HG troop. We just moved troops. We used to have a contest that whoever raised the most wreaths would get a prize.
Yeah.
Like we would put names in a hat for whoever reached like 100 wreaths, and we would pull them out, and there would be 3 girls every single meeting, and they would go up and get that prize.
Yeah, that's what we do something similar to that. I don't know what the prizes are, but actually for that I probably do.
All right.
We're all, yeah.
I don't really. I'm running around trying to help set up stuff.
It was like $93.75. Got 20,
He went around and collected all that. He did a great job.
15, and a ton of ones.
A ton of ones. That's true. It's a ton of
Got
ones.
28 ones, 3 5s, 3 20s, and
It's crazy that people handed you 20s. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
one person handed me a 20.
Were the other 20s you gave change for, or?
No, the other one was just the other 10.
Oh,
Yeah, 2 years ago when I did it, like one of the houses gave me like $100.
wow. That's really nice.
Nice. Yeah, the first house I went to gave me a couple.
I mean, look through the tops of those
Working with it on Halloween.
Yeah.
So a lot of people wanted to take it for costume, but I did
Well,
anyway.
this is interesting, Cole.
I don't know what that is.
I don't know what it is either.
Cause I emailed the guy with the one through the FBI.
Maybe that's how he got your information.
Yeah, but I didn't find out. I don't know what that is.
So
Well, we'll look it up and see what it
They
is.
gave me a tuition and
That's
travel
just at
protection
the,
plan sheet.
fair. I raised
a
like
list of-
50.
Well, we'll look it up and see. Do they send this everywhere or do they just send this to people specific? Because there's not, the signature looks printed. So they could send out 4,000 of these. We don't know.
Yeah,
But George Mason is excellent.
but it says accepted.
Yeah, I know. That's interesting. I don't think I signed you up for this. Enrollment deadline is December.
Secret Service facility, law enforcement.
Outstanding. We should definitely, if this is decent, I'll look it up. And if it's decent, we'll do it.
I do want to do the FBI one.
It also would probably help you with admission here. So that's a good one. I'm just saying.
I was thinking about, I might send an email to the deputy that I emailed with about the FBI one and ask him if this is all related.
No, look at this. We'll look at it first before you do that. You want me to keep it or you can?
I'll keep the rest of them.
Cool. All right. Let me pass out some stuff so we can start. Hey, gang. I like that shirt. That's a fun shirt, Louis. It's like it can't decide what it wants to be. Yeah. All right. I have a bunch of things to hand back. So I'm going to hand them back to you. So have your, oh, yes. Have your binders out so you can put stuff away appropriately.
That's literally everything that
I got it. I'll stick it over here. Now, we get it. All right. I think these are all crazy out of order. So, all right, Claire, Darcy, Drew. If there's no grade on the top, it's a full credit thing, whatever that might be. This is, I don't know who did this, also Rico, so. And I still don't know who did this. So I haven't been able to give credit for this homework, whoever it belongs to.
That actually might be Louis.
Is this yours, Louis?
I think I recognize it.
Did you print it out at home? Different, somebody printed it out at home.
Yeah,
We'll send.
I didn't print mine out at
We'll
home.
send. Oops, oh, sorry, Sky.
does not look like what you did.
If somebody's, I don't know.
What did you say? No grade?
I thought this might be yours. Is this yours?
No, this one says my name.
No, is this yours? It's laying around. Okay, well, somebody doesn't have credit, so if you look at your homework for lesson 9 and you don't have credit, it might be yours.
I sent it to you.
Lily.
Oh, that's not mine.
I dropped credit.
Okay,
I sent you mine because I was in quarantine.
yeah, this is somebody's lesson 9. That's just their notes, it's just empty. Okay, Lily, this is you again too. I think this is your whole, I think your whole lab just got left here. So actually, I wouldn't be surprised if this lesson 9 is, I don't know, but I think that's all yours. It just maybe came out of your binder somehow. All right, so this is still a mystery. Nobody claims this?
No, this is mine.
Okay, nobody claims it either.
This one, I think
I gave
It's
this
not
to you.
yours.
I gave this to you to do
not mine.
all the extra work that I already had.
Okay, it was just extra pieces?
Yeah.
All right.
What do you say that this, like, no grade?
If it has no grade, then you got full credit,
What does that mean?
meaning it's either complete or it's complete or it's 100, depending on how it was set. All right, and then this is somebody's, this is a lab. No, I'm sorry, this is a binder work for somebody. And I don't know who, so if you're
It's not
missing,
mine, because the way it's spelled DNA again is not.
yeah, if you're missing,
It's way too different.
what is this?
That's
What
Can't tell how much one this is.
All right.
Lesson 8, if your lesson 8 is missing from your binder, is it you? Okay, good. There you go, because you may want that to study, because you guys have a test coming up soon.
Oh, yeah, this is definitely mine already.
All right, there you go. Your handwriting and Drew's handwriting are very similar. Over the years, I've gotten y'all confused more than once, so. All right,
I attempted my handwriting.
hang on, I'm gonna look at one thing really fast, and then we have a lot to cover today, but I'm gonna see if I can find real quick whose that is, maybe, possibly. Should we take a second? I'm still snipply, but I don't have, I'm not sick, I'm just sniffly.
So I went this year alone with my brother and my friend who's a little bit older than me. Her brother was 14, but we had to stick with a 14-year-old. He didn't really want to treat, so you know.
What do you guys, what did you dress up as?
All right, this is homework 8, and I am missing homework 8, no, not homework 8, sorry, homework 9. And I do not have homework 9 credited for Sky, Darcy, or Anthony. So it could be, is it yours, Sky? Is it your, Darcy, that doesn't look like your handwriting, so it must be, maybe it's Anthony. That might make sense. Okay, all right. So let's roll. We have a lot to cover, and our lab today is going to be a fun one. It's not a, it's more like a pen and paper lab, but it's a kind of a mystery solving thing. Should be fun. So we are at the point now where we're going to be discussing human heredity. So we've been talking about DNA, how it replicates, how protein synthesis functions, and then you can actually see the traits. And now we're going to be talking about some specific things that can be inherited by humans. And why is that not up there? That would be helpful if you could see it. Okay, hold on. I thought it went and it didn't go. Y'all, it's a day. Hi, you come into mama? Come on, you lazy butt. There we go. He's a good boy. Yes, he is.
Alfred is starting to like people.
Oh, yeah, he came over to me when I was there. The other night.
Came up the other day and I like called him for an hour. He was awesome.
Ozzy's fine as long as people aren't coming in the door. He just doesn't like people coming in the door.
It's like everybody's carrying explosives.
Oh, wait, that is not it. Hold on. Remove it. This is a funny thing about this connection here. If I don't remove the TV from my list of devices, it can't find it. I have to remove it every time and then reinstall it. And then it's like, oh yeah, here I am.
But you remove it from the wall?
No, I have to remove it from the found displays. I don't know why it does that. Here it goes. Boom.
The other day my curtain fell, then I put it back up. That was that fun point.
Ooh, yeah, that's not fun. All right, so here we are, human heredity. Let's see what we can learn today. There's some really interesting stuff today. This is a very tangible lesson because a lot of this stuff is stuff you may have come into contact with before, with people that you may have met. So heredity, that's the passing of traits from parent to offspring. So this occurs in all living organisms that reproduce sexually. It's heredity. It could be a plant. Yep. Could be a plant, could be a bird, could be an animal. I mean, a human, whatever. Birds are obviously animals. So genes on chromosomes have what we call alleles. We've talked about this before, right? And those are traits that show up in an organism. Ozzy, you gave me a stray hair somewhere. So the different forms of a trait that a gene may, where did that go? Oh, allele is the different forms of a trait that a gene may have. And so you get one chromosome, one half of this pair from your mother, one half of this pair from your father, right? And then we call that a homologous set. So multiple alleles. All right, so we're going to talk about different kinds of population genetics today too. So with multiple alleles, what that means, typically you've only got 2 alleles for a gene in a diploid organism. What's diploid mean? Do you remember? Diploid means you have all your chromosomes. What's haploid mean? Do you remember?
Not all.
Half, right? Where do you find haploid cells?
Wasn't it plant?
Sex cells. All sex cells are haploid because they have half the DNA, right? Because when they come together, they're going to make a complete organism with all the DNA. So typically there are only 2 alleles in a diploid organism. So where there is a gene existing with more than 2 alleles, we call this multiple alleles or multiple allelism. So in this case, if you look, there's not just like big C, little c. There's not big C brown, little c white, and you only have one of 2 choices. In this case, you've got 4 different alleles. You've got this little c, ch, and this little ch, and this produces these different types of coats in rabbits, this different coloring.
I like the Himalayan one, it's so cute.
And that's why there are definitely multiple alleles for all kinds of human traits. I mean, think about how many things are not binary with humans. Eyes are not always blue or brown, right? And then you've got, right. And then the other thing you have are polygenic traits. Now remember, multiple alleles means in the population, in the gene pool, in all the organisms that carry the genes, there's more than 2 alleles. Lots of different alleles can combine in different ways. And one's obviously going to be more dominant than another. Polygenic is different. Polygenic is one trait. We're talking about one trait before as well, but this is multiple genes, not multiple alleles, but multiple genes that control a polygenic trait. So traits that display a continuous distribution, such as height or skin color, are polygenic. So by continuous distribution, they mean it's not binary, it's a spectrum. So think about skin color. Skin color really is a spectrum, right? There's not 2 colors of humans. There's a lot of colors of humans. And that's because that is a polygenic trait. There are multiple genes that control things like the amount of melanin pigment produced in skin. And height as well. Think about how many different heights there are for adult humans. That's crazy. A lot. There's a huge spectrum of height. Adults aren't just short or tall. Yep. And that's because it's a polygenic trait. There are lots of genes that control that trait. So here they are put against one another to compare and contrast. So multiple alleles. You see those 2 bluish looking alleles over there on the left? Yeah. Okay. And then you've got 3 other alleles in the gene pool that could possibly come to play. Hey, come on in. Those could possibly come into play depending on what the parent organisms possess. Yay. So that is a multiple allele. Now, if you look at the polygenic trait, you see there are 6 alleles, 3 pairs, that's 3 genes that control one trait. So these 2 alleles form this gene, which defines a monogenic trait. Monogenic means one gene. So polygenic means more than one gene, right? So it's one gene, but there are other options. One of those could have combined with pink or yellow or green, or maybe green and pink would combine, just depending on what the parents have.
In math the other day, I learned that highly means, it was in the word, but I can't remember the word. Anyway, it had highly in it, and that means higher, and high-low means lower. Okay, yep. All right, so here we go. There's multiple alleles, but there are more than 2 multiple, right? More than 2 or multiple alleles present in the population. So that's multiple alleles. Does everybody understand what that means? More than 2 alleles possible. Polygenic, on the other hand, is a little different. All 3 of these gene sets of alleles, right, are going to work together and produce a polygenic trait. So multiple alleles can produce different phenotypes, but if you remember that polygenic traits are the ones that are on a spectrum, it's a continuum, like skin color, like height. There aren't just, purple and green people. There are many, many shades of people. Hopefully none are purple or green. And there are not just tiny short people and super tall people. There's people of all different kinds of heights. And that's why you get a polygenic trait. All right, so a typical human has 46 chromosomes in 23 pairs, right? 23 come from mom, 23 come from dad.
The number of chromosomes helps identify what an organism is. So, for example, a roundworm has only got 4 chromosomes. All right, that rice in the picture there, that particular type of rice has 24. Humans, there's Homo sapiens, that's humans, we have 46. Now look at that chimpanzee has 48. And the dog has 78. Now the dog has more than we do. So it doesn't mean necessarily the more advanced the organism, the more chromosomes. That's not necessarily true. It just, different organisms have different numbers. Yes.
I was looking at something in history, and I was starting to wonder, where did all the hominids go when the Homo sapiens came? Because now we're Homo sapiens sapiens. Where did all the hominids go?
Yep, exactly. So actually, we're going to be getting to that in a couple weeks. It should be kind of cool. So this is going to be important to remember because you need the correct number of chromosomes to produce an organism. So if we're talking about humans, we have egg and sperm. Those are haploid. So they contain half the amount of chromosomes. Half haploid, dip means both double. We'll double the half, so that's a full amount. So these cells are called sex cells or gametes. Gametes is really the better word. You can call them sex cells, but gametes work. Yeah.
So if it's X and Y, that means that it's a girl.
X is girl, X, Y is male. Female, male, biologically, or XX, XY. Now, there are conditions where you can have like 2 X's and a Y. And there are conditions where you can have part of a Y break off and stick to an X, and all kinds of part of an X break off and stick to a Y. Those are much more rare. The most common one is like an XXY, and that's Turner syndrome. And that still presents biologically as female for the most part. But I believe they don't, I'm pretty sure they cannot reproduce, people with Turner syndrome, and they have other medical concerns as well. But your typical standard female biological human is going to have 2 X's, and the male is going to have an XY. This is because, hey guys, too loud.
Shut up.
Don't say that. This is because every single egg has just an X. That's all you got. And the Y's and the X's, the sperm divide up evenly with an even number of X's and an even number of Y's. And depending on whether you have a sperm with an X or a sperm with a Y, that's how you get either a male or female offspring. So there's your XX and XY. Now, all other types of cells have 46 chromosomes in them, and they're diploid, right? This is true of most. There are some cells that are going to be a little different, but we call them autosomes. Okay, autosomes are your body cells. Sometimes they're referred to as somatic cells. And then your gametes are your haploid cells. So all human egg cells carry a single X chromosome, and half of the sperm carry an X, half of the sperm carry a Y. So that ensures that about half of the zygotes that are produced and fertilized are going to be 46XY, 46XX. So you're going to end up with about half male and half female offspring, which is what you need to keep a population moving forward, right? If you had predominantly male offspring and less females, it would be difficult. Now in nature, you'll see that there are often less males than females. Deer is a good example, okay? And any kind of herd animal, there are usually more females than males. Cole, you're too loud. And the reason for that is because they select in their reproductive process, they select for more females because one male will mate with multiple females in one mating season because they only have mating season once a year, right? They can only mate, deer only mate once a year. Most animals in the wild will mate once or twice a year. Whereas humans have the ability to do that once every 12 months. I mean 12 times a year. So there's multiple options for humans to reproduce versus fewer options for animals in the wild. Yes.
Are the things with the blue heads and the wispy tails children?
Those are sperm.
So basically us.
Not yet. You'd have to put those together to get us. Yep.
Okay. So
Yep.
that's just messed up.
What you got, Claire?
I just thought of this question.
Mhm.
Using genomes and stuff,
Yep.
could scientists tell how many girls and how many boys you would have?
No, because it's kind of random which sperm gets to the egg.
It's a race.
It's a race.
Yeah,
It is a race.
It's competition.
So whichever sperm gets to the egg first, and it also, there's also all kinds of interesting timing involved too. Like the sperm that carry the Y swim faster than the sperm that carry the X. So if an egg is present when the Y sperm get there first, there's a higher likelihood of male offspring. But if the egg is not present when all the sperm get there, those Ys actually die faster than the X's. The X's hang on. And then if the egg shows up, they're like, hey, our turn. And then you're more likely to get female offspring.
I definitely sat on those when I was an infant.
Sat on him.
I want to be this tiny green on just like
Mhm.
guy.
So now we have what are called sex-linked genes. There are some genes that exist on the X and Y chromosomes. And this is really important because we're going to be talking about this today in lab. And also these tend to be some of the more impactful genes when it comes to genetic disorders. And this is because look at this X chromosome. You see all these genes on here? Now, if you have another X chromosome, okay, so you have a female offspring. If you have another X chromosome, your chances of having a gene that covers a genetic disorder that one of these might carry is going to be higher, right? You'd have to have two recessives for something to be, for that phenotype to be produced. So what you get here is far less likelihood that these are going to show. But, and my biology professors were all women at college, but they said this, and it's true, the Y chromosome is really weak. It really is. Sorry, boys. It's a very weak little chromosome, and it doesn't have anything to counteract. So if it has, if there's something on this X chromosome that's not good, that's a recessive gene that's going to cause a disorder, there's nothing to counteract it on the Y. So you tend to have that presented. So what happens is you get most of these sex-linked genes found on the X. There's also more room for them because it's a much bigger chromosome physically. And more than 100 sex-linked genetic disorders are found on the X. Males have just one X, thus all the X-linked alleles are expressed in males, even if they're recessive. So that's what I was just saying. So some sex-linked disorders are, so these are things that are going to present more in males or females. They're going to be on the X chromosome, but who's going to show them? Males or females? Think about it. Males.
They're weaker.
Because they have nothing to counteract it on their little Y chromosome. So some sex-linked disorders are going to be color blindness. There are far fewer women who are colorblind than men.
My dad is colorblind.
Hemophilia, which is what we're going to be talking about today in our lab. We're going to be looking at hemophilia in European royal families, which is pretty crazy because not only is it sex-linked and not only is it, an interesting family that you can follow through history, but I'll show you in lab with some family trees. They do a lot of interbreeding to keep the lines royal, which means they're increasing the likelihood of those recessive alleles popping up generation after generation, which is why interbreeding isn't always great. So muscular dystrophy, which you may have heard of, much more common in boys and girls. Fragile X syndrome. Okay, so Fragile X syndrome is one where the X itself has it's incomplete. And when it presents in males, but in these cases, all these cases, females are called carriers because the females are going to carry this disorder, but they aren't going to show it because their other X chromosomes going to cover it up almost all the time. So color blindness. Let's look at color blindness for a minute. The most common disorder is red-green color blindness. It's going to affect 1 in 12 males, which is about 8% of the population, and 1 in 200 females, which is less than 1%. Can anybody not see the numbers in those circles?
I can see all the numbers.
Anybody not see them?
23, 36, 9, 4, 48, 15.
Where are my boys? Can any of my boys not see the numbers?
I can see all of
You can see all the numbers?
I can see them. It's a little hard. I would assume it's harder for me because.
Can you see them, Anthony?
36,
You can't tell if they're there. So that's interesting.
48.
Can you see the first one, Colson?
36 is easier.
Can you see what this one says here?
36 and 40.
You can see that? Can you see that one, Anthony?
I can.
Not really. Okay, so that's a 23. So you might have some level of color. That'd be interesting to find out. You can go online and look at, and it doesn't mean that you don't see color. It means certain colors are not as easy for you to see.
The 36, the 9 and the 23 are the hardest to see, but I can still kind of see them. It takes a little while. But I can see the 23.
Now, my dad's colorblind, so it wouldn't be weird for you to be, but my dad, yeah, that's part of why he took the wrong pills and ended up having a stroke because one was green and one was blue and he could, yep.
I didn't know that.
Get sex-linked genes.
I'm not colorblind.
Okay, so Some women have a rare supercolor vision trait called tetrachromacy, and it's linked in the X chromosome. And these women can see up to 100 million shades of color because they have 4 types of cone cells in their eye instead of the usual 3. So there are typically in your eye cell, there are 2 in your eyes, there are 2 types of cells that detect color, light. Your rods collect light or detect light, and your cones detect color. We usually have 3 different types of cones, but some women have 4 and they can see colors. So how many bars can you see is really going to depend on how good your color vision is.
It's a lot of bars.
It's got bars all the way.
Yeah. So a thing to do would be go home, look these up. There are little like tests you can do online. Wow, if you're counting, I would have to tap them. And there are color tests you can do on YouTube too, even. So hemophilia.
I can see all of them. I'm just too lazy to count.
Those are fun though. I like those.
I can see all of them. They're just.
All right, so let's look at hemophilia because we have a lot of them to cover today because this is a lot of stuff today before lab. So hemophilia, there's 2 important genes carried on the X chromosome that help blood clot. So in hemophilia, a protein necessary for normal blood clotting is just missing. They don't have it.
Some people have a certain condition that their blood can't clot.
That's what this is. This is hemophilia.
Obviously.
So about 1 in 10,000 males is born with hemophilia, according to this stat that I found. I found another stat that's a little different.
Is a lot.
So this is the royal family. Okay. So in these cases, if you get, listen, so in these cases, if you get a cut, you can bleed a lot. It's very, very hard to stop your blood from bleeding.
Yeah, that's my mom right there.
Yeah. Well, your mom had different stuff. Well, now she's on thinners, so she'll bleed a lot. Yeah. So if you have hemophilia, you can also have internal bleeding though. Like if you get banged really hard and you get a bruise, that's because your capillaries, break and burst. If you get banged really hard and you have hemophilia, you can bleed internally, like your whole leg can swell up and it gets really, really bad.
Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip aren't up to date because
Yeah.
Harry married Meghan.
Oh yeah, underneath them. Yeah. Yep. And William married Kate. So there's also muscular dystrophy. So this is a disorder that results in progressive weakening and loss of skeletal muscles. So in the US, about 1 in 3,000 males is born with muscular dystrophy. And there used to be a big telethon on TV every year called it was Jerry's Kids or whatever. And that's what they raise money for muscular dystrophy. Their muscles do not work right and they get progressively worse. And you have to consider you use your muscles for things you don't think about every day, like breathing, digesting food. Your heart is a muscle. Yeah, well, they'll lose that first. They'll lose stuff like walking and ability to use their hands first.
It'll kill you, right?
Eventually, in a lot of cases, yes. So here's Fragile X. So Fragile X causes an intellectual disability. It causes behavioral and learning changes, and it has various physical characteristics: a long, narrow face, large ears, a prominent jaw and forehead, unusually flexible fingers, flat feet, and they get enlarged testicles too. It's just that doesn't sound like fun. So, so I actually have a friend. I had a friend I used to work with when I taught school at Cottage years ago. A friend that I used to work with is a carrier for Fragile X, and so is her sister. And so at first, when she wanted to have children, she tried egg donation because she didn't want to use her own eggs because she knew she carried this disorder. And it gave her at that point a 1 in 4 chance of having a son that had severe disability. She ended up adopting 2 kids, but we had a lot of talks about this because she's the only person I've known personally that carried Fragile X. And it was a big concern for her. Like she did not want to have her own biological children because she has uncles that are affected and she didn't want to pass it on because it's not a fun disorder. So other sex-linked genes are things that produce colors. For example, if you ever see a cat with this coloring, a tortoiseshell cat, it's female. And this is really interesting because this has to do with the alleles for colors being on your X chromosome. Now, see, there's an allele for orange and an allele for black. So actually what happens is during embryological development, this cat will have like one allele switch on and then another switch on and then another, and they switch back and forth. So as the outside of the cat's body and skin and integumentary system form, parts of it are going to be coded for orange and parts for black. And that's how you get the tabby, which is really, really cool. They're my favorites. So females have 2 X chromosomes, but males have only 1. In female cells, 1 X chromosome is randomly switched off, randomly. And then when it's randomly switched back on or off, it can alternate. That's how you get that type of pattern. So environmental impact on gene expression. So the environment can impact it. Have you ever been to a cemetery, like a colonial cemetery? Okay, you ever noticed how small the graves are? These people were short. If you've ever been to like Williamsburg or whatever, or any place like that and looked at those old colonial cemeteries, they have their headstone, their footstone, they're like 5 foot tall. I mean, most people were not all that tall. Why is that? Okay, here's an environmental impact. You can have the same genetic makeup as somebody from that time today with really great nutrition and good medicine and grow tall. But in those days, you were far more affected by diet and access to the proper nutrition because they didn't have it as available as we did. So that could make them shorter than they naturally would have been. So this is cool. I love this. Another way, we talked about this a little bit, right? So the environment can change how genes are expressed. So this is a Himalayan rabbit, and Himalayan cats and rabbits are ones that are darker, where the body is most body heat is lost to the environment. So your ears, right? Your ears, your nose, your tail, your feet. These are the parts of your body that are losing heat fastest because they're exposed to the cold air and the snow, and they're dark because they're going to absorb more sunlight and stay warmer that way. But you see this dude, they taped an ice pack to him or strapped it to him. And if you expose it to the cold for long enough, he's going to get a brown spot there too. So genetic counselors, these are people who are going to analyze a pedigree chart to infer the genotypes of family members. Okay, do you remember a couple weeks back for homework, you had a pedigree, but all you had to do really was draw out who had who as family. There was like, you had to add family members, like this one married that one and they had a kid, right? So this is how you use them. So that's just how you draw them. This is how you actually use them. You put traits in the pedigree and you can see how they're being passed. So many traits are strongly influenced by environmental or non-genetic factors, including nutrition and exercise, which we just talked about. And then genetic counselors are people who are going to look at your pedigree and your makeup and help you make some decisions about, like with my friend, should she go ahead and have her own biological offspring? Or should she not? These are choices she had to make. So a picture of a chromosome arranged like this in a picture is called a karyotype. Is this a male or a female? Can you tell? Male. Very good. Yep. Because it's got this little dinky guy, right? That makes it a male. So karyotypes are going to be important. We'll see in a minute why. So we have recessive alleles. So many human genes have become known through the study of genetic disorders. Most genetic disorders are usually recessive, not always, usually recessive. Some autosomal recessive conditions, so this is what we call these autosomal recessive conditions: albinism, sickle cell disease, cystic fibrosis, and Tay-Sachs. So we're going to look at these for a minute. Yes.
There's a kid that goes to my gym.
Mm-hmm.
He's Asian and I think he has
Albinism. I know a little girl who has albinism.
What's the one right there? The baby?
So this is cystic fibrosis. We're going to get to it in a minute. We're going to do each one. So albinism. So when we talk about epidemiology, this is about like the prevalence or incidence. Incidence is how often a disease is diagnosed within a year. Prevalence is how the disease exists in a population, like how frequently you would find it, percentage. So people with albinism have the following symptoms. It's not just that they're pale, is probably what you're used to thinking. Like albino rabbits are white with red eyes. So they have the absence of color in their, hang on, Darcy. They have the absence of color in their skin, hair, or eyes. They have a lighter than normal coloring in their skin, hair, or eyes. And this depends also on their genetic makeup. So if you have a person whose genetic makeup is, say, Nordic, like they're Swedish or Norwegian of descent, or maybe Irish or Scottish, us pale people, they're going to be really pale, like this little boy here. However, if they're of African descent or Egyptian or Middle Eastern descent, they won't be as pale, but they'll still be pale. So patches of skin that have an absence of color. Strabismus or crossed eyes. Yes, that goes along with it. Their eyes are highly affected in albino people. Photophobia, which is sensitivity to light. That makes sense, right? If your eyes, the lighter the color of your eyes, the more affected they are by light. So if you're somebody who has, like, I have really light blue eyes, I cannot be outside without sunglasses. If you have brown eyes, you'd probably be more comfortable than I would be.
Oh, it's so bright.
Mm-hmm. Nystagmus, which is involuntary rapid eye movements. It's when your eyes, you ever seen anybody whose eyes bounce like this? That's a horizontal nystagmus. There's also a vertical nystagmus, which does this. They mean different things. Usually, like a vertical nystagmus can have something to do with a neurological condition, and a horizontal nystagmus, where it's bouncing back and forth like that. Nobody, are you looking to see if anybody's eyes are bouncing? Nobody's eyes are bouncing. They would have to bounce. They bounce really fast, and it's uncontrollable. They can't control it. Impaired vision or blindness. Most people with albinism have very, very affected vision. Some of them are legally blind. And astigmatism, that's a condition where when you look at lights, they give you like a halo effect. So epidemiology, this affects all ethnic backgrounds. When you look at a light, it makes like a big circle around the light at night, kind of like when you're looking through like a lens flare or a windshield, but it's kind of multiplied. It's to the point where it's very distracting. But your daddy does have astigmatism, so maybe you have it. Astigmatism is common. A lot of people have it. So the frequency worldwide is about 1 in 17,000. Does anybody know anyone with albinism? I do. I have a friend whose daughter is albino. Yep.
Wow.
And the prevalence of different forms of albinism varies considerably by population. So it's highest overall in people of sub-Saharan African descent. So that's the southern part of the African continent. Those people have it more frequently than others, but it's prevalent everywhere. So now we have sickle cell disease. So you ever heard of sickle cell disease before you're reading this week?
Oh.
So sickle cell disease is awful. I also knew a girl with sickle cell disease. It was terrible. So it causes fatigue and anemia. Anemia is when you have low iron in your blood and you can't carry as much oxygen. And here's why. You see how these red blood cells are shaped like little flattened balls. It's a disc with a squish in the middle. Like they're not quite a donut, it's flat in the middle. Sickle cells look like this, like a sickle, the thing you use to cut wheat. Like the Grim Reaper carries a sickle. That's what they're shaped like, and they can't carry oxygen. So you have blood cells that are the wrong shape, can't carry oxygen to your muscles and to all the parts of your body that need it. Yes.
Is it like asthma?
Is it like what?
Asthma?
Asthma? No, asthma has more to do with the narrowing of your breathing tubes. But sickle cell is actually the cells that carry the oxygen from your lungs to the rest of your body. So they have what are called pain crises. And I'm talking extreme pain. They can't do anything. When they're in a pain crisis, they're like, my friend, I worked with a girl named Lakia, and she would call into work all the time and be like, I'm having a pain crisis, I can't come. And she could barely talk when she called me. Her whole body hurt. It was terrible. They have dactylitis, which is swelling and inflammation in the hands and feet, and arthritis, bacterial infections, sudden pooling of blood in the spleen or liver congestion, lung and heart injury, leg ulcers, bone infarcts, which are death in portions of the bone. It's terrible. And aseptic necrosis. This means tissue starts to die without an infection causing it. That's pretty terrible. Eye damage. So epidemiology, it affects all ethnic backgrounds. Frequency worldwide is 112, that should say per 100,000 people. But this one is one that is much more common in people of African descent. It's 1 in 500 in the US for people of African descent.
That's still pretty good.
That's really high. It goes from 112 per 100,000 to 1 in 500. So people of European descent and Asian descent and Latin descent are very unlikely to have it. It's almost always within the African descent community. Yes.
Why is he smiling?
Well, because he's being taken care of. Otherwise, I would say I wouldn't be smiling if he was in a pain crisis, because it would be awful. Cystic fibrosis. Okay, this one's more common. You hear a lot about cystic fibrosis. So these people have very salty tasting skin. I know that seems like a weird thing, but yep.
Who went over there and tasted the boy's skin?
I don't know. Somebody must have licked it. Yeah, we're not licking babies.
But she put like some salt.
Ah.
We were just
It's just
listening
like,
at the same
okay.
time. And I was
So
like,
they
I
have,
swear.
hang on, we gotta stay with it because we have a lot to do. So they have a persistent, Drew, they have a persistent cough at times with phlegm. Okay, people with cystic fibrosis very often have so much trouble breathing with so much phlegm. They produce so much mucus in their lungs that they either have to wear a vest that vibrates rapidly and it breaks it all loose so that they can more easily cough it up. Or what they used to do is they used to have these, they probably still have them, but before the vests came out, it was kind of like a big bulky ring that someone would wear and it would fit in the palm of their hand. And it had a big disc on it with like a nub that stuck out. So kind of like this shape. And they would pound on their back every day for like half an hour twice a day or whatever, this was part of your daily routine to get through life, was to have your mom or your dad beat you on your back so you could breathe. It's not fun. It's about as terrible as it sounds.
I prefer
Frequent lung infections, including pneumonia. This is just showing lungs that you, so that you know what it is. It's just, there's lungs in there. You can see. So frequent, no. It's just showing you it's a lung problem. So frequent lung infections or pneumonia, bronchitis. Guys, hold on. We got to stay with it. Wheezing or shortness of breath, which is similar asthma, wheezing and shortness of breath, but this is a different condition. Poor growth or weight gain in spite of a good appetite. Frequent greasy, bulky stools or difficulty with bowel movement, so it can affect your digestive system too. That's terrible. And the males can be infertile and unable to reproduce. And this happens in all ethnic backgrounds. Frequency worldwide is 1 in 3,200, so that is relatively common. And the highest overall in people of European descent, far more likely in people of European descent. Now, Tay-Sachs is going to be one that is mostly limited to a very specific ethnic community. They don't. So people with Tay-Sachs, this is a terrible disease. It's a neurological disorder that gets progressively worse. So they are overly startled by noises and movements. Ooh, there should be a space there. Very slow to reach milestones like learning to crawl. And then they lose the skills that they've already learned. I got this for a British, so it says learned instead of learned. Yep. They're floppy and weak, and it gets worse until they're unable to move and they're paralyzed. Difficulty swallowing, and this disease progresses through childhood. They don't get to adult age and be this sick. This is fast and it's awful. Loss of vision or hearing. Muscle stiffness, which you can imagine hurts and they can't do anything about it. Seizures. And it's caused by the absence of a vital enzyme. Okay, that's without it, you get this fatty substance that builds up and accumulates in your cells, and especially in the nerve cells and in your brain. So that accumulation is what causes the damage because you're missing the enzyme that stops it from accumulating. So here's the interesting epidemiology of Tay-Sachs. It can occur in most ethnic backgrounds, and its frequency worldwide is 1 in 100,000, but it's higher incidence in French Canadians, Cajuns, people from Louisiana, older Amish, those with Irish ancestry, but overall in the Ashkenazi Jewish descent population, that's like Eastern European Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, 1 in 3,600, which is way higher than 1 in 100,000. This is something that people with Ashkenazi Jewish descent tend to look into before having children, because it can be so common in their communities, and it's awful. You don't want.
Why does he wear that thing on?
I think it was something that was strapping him to a bed or something that I clipped out because nobody else had anything in their background in the picture. So dominant alleles, those were all disorders caused by recessive alleles. So autosomal dominant conditions. So the ones we're going to look at are Huntington's, Marfan, polydactyly, and achondroplasia. I can't speak. So Huntington's, I'm going to whip through these quickly because I'm looking at our time. So people with Huntington's have the following. This is when you get to adulthood before you've really got to deal with difficulty concentrating, memory lapses, depression, mood swings, irritability, or aggressive behavior, stumbling and clumsiness, involuntary jerking or fidgety movements of the limbs and the body. Their bodies move uncontrollably and they can't stop it.
Like advanced ADHD.
Well, no, it's really, really terrible. Like, actually, this is one of the diseases when medical cannabidiol stuff, when like medical marijuana came out, this is one of the diseases they looked at, because people with uncontrollable Huntington's tremors, who, I mean, their bodies would shake like this and they couldn't, I'm talking shake, and they couldn't stop it. And some of those, in some cases, the medical marijuana stopped the shakes for some of these people with Huntington's, just stopped it like that. So that was one of the first things that people really looked at with cannabis and medicine.
Like that after writing one of the rights.
So difficulty speaking clearly. And eventually they find that they've lost all communication, or it's very difficult. Swallowing problems, increasing slow or rigid movements, breathing problems, difficulty moving around, and sometimes they lose the ability to walk or sit up by themselves. Awful. All ethnic backgrounds, frequency is 2.7 per 100,000 worldwide, and it's highest in people of Egyptian descent. Interesting. Now, Marfan syndrome. This is a weird one. Very interesting, though. Tall, slender build, disproportionate long legs and fingers. breastbone that protrudes outward or dips inward, high arched palate, crowded teeth, heart murmurs. It causes heart conditions, not just all this physical appearance stuff. Extreme nearsightedness, abnormally curved spine, flat feet. Ethnic backgrounds, all of them. 2.5 per 10,000 worldwide. It's more common. You might see somebody with Marfans, and if they're walking around with their clothes on and you're not paying close attention to their hands, you might not notice it, but their hands are usually a giveaway if they're dressed. Oh, one more thing about it. Marfans, it is suspected that Abraham Lincoln had Marfan syndrome. If you take a good look at close pictures of Lincoln, yes, abnormally tall is one of the, yep. Polydactyly, extra digits. Anybody have polydactyly in their family?
I don't know.
Extra digits?
But I
Who
think
has
my
it?
I think my great
Mhm.
grandpa.
Had extra fingers? How about you?
my little cousin had it, and they had to cut his thumb off.
Yep. So my cousin's son had polydactyly. He had 6 digits on every appendage. He had an extra little finger here, but it had no bones. No bones, but it was a finger. So his wasn't like complete polydactyly. It was partial, but he had an extra finger, extra toe, little toes and little fingers. And they just tied strings around them, and the tissue died and they fell off. We got to keep moving for a minute though, guys, because I'm watching time. So you have preaxial polydactyly. You have central polydactyly, so there's different kinds, and postaxial polydactyly. So that's like, where is the extra digit? Is it here, here, or here? And then all ethnic backgrounds, frequency is 1 in 1,000. It's really pretty common. A lot of people have an extra digit. Sometimes it's just 1, and they take it off when you're a baby, like they did with my cousin's baby. And it's highest overall in people, oh, I got another one right there, of African descent, in 1 in 150. All right, now, Marfan, that should say achondroplasia. I didn't change it. See, I got to fix a bunch of these. Achondroplasia, this is also what is known as dwarfism. There are multiple types of achondroplasia. So it is that depending on the type, we're going to speak about the predominant type here. They have a large head with a large forehead, flattened bridge of nose, crowded or crooked teeth, short arms, legs, and fingers, but a normal sized torso. This is in this particular type of dwarfism. Upper arms and thighs are more shortened, bowed lower legs, curved lower spine, which is called a swayback or lordosis, which can lead to a hunchback or kyphosis when they get older. Small hump near the shoulders that usually goes away after the child begins walking. Flat feet that are short and broad. Extra space between the middle and ring fingers, which is called a trident hand. Poor muscle tone and loose joints. Short spells of slow or stopped breathing, which is apnea. Middle ear infections occur often, which can lead to hearing loss. Delayed developmental milestones, such as walking, occurring at 8 to 24 months instead of 12 months. And small canals in the spinal bones that can cause breathing problems. And there are 2 main types, proportionate and disproportionate. And there are 14 types of dwarfism or achondroplasia overall. Proportionate, this stuff about the arms and legs being smaller and the torso being average sized, that would be disproportionate. Proportionate is exactly what it sounds like. Your limbs are in proportion to your torso, but you're just very small. Epidemiology, all ethnic backgrounds. Frequency is 1 in 25,000. And anybody know anybody with achondroplasia? I do. Yep. I've known several people with achondroplasia. So we're going to whip through because we're about late now. So human genes and chromosomes. Chromosomes 21 and 22 are the smallest. Chromosome 22 contains 43 million base pairs, even though it's the smallest. Chromosomes 21 has about 32 million, even though it's small. Chromosomal disorders. Most common error in meiosis occurs when homologous chromosomes fail to separate, and it's known as non-disjunction. If that occurs, you get abnormal numbers of chromosomes, and they find their way into gametes and cause chromosomal disorders. So we were talking about genetic. Hang with me, guys. These are now chromosomal. So if 2 copies of an autosomal chromosome fail to separate, an individual may be born with 3 copies. So this is called trisomy if it's 3 copies. See that right there? The most common trisomy is trisomy 21, and you know trisomy 21 as Down syndrome. I bet everybody in here knows someone with Down syndrome. I do. It's having an extra 21st chromosome. You have 3 instead of 2. And you guys know what characterizes Down syndrome, because pretty much everybody knows somebody with Down syndrome, right? Yeah, all of these issues that they deal with.
We,
Hang on, we got it. Let me whip through the last ones and then I'll take questions. So disorders also among the sex chromosomes, you can have Turner, which we talked about, and Klinefelter. So Turner's there's only one X. I said it wrong earlier. Turner's there's only one X, not a Y or another X. Klinefelter's is when you've got two X's or three X's. So Klinefelter syndrome appears this way. Turner syndrome appears this way. They present differently. Yes, they're little naked models. So in Turner syndrome, it presents biologically female, but with a bunch of issues. And Klinefelter presents biologically male, but with a bunch. Human genes, human genome are complete set of genetic information. You guys know that. So the Human Genome Project, ongoing effort from 1990 to present. Molecular genetics, DNA fingerprinting. We've done this in lab. And gene therapy. This is the last big thing. So gene therapy, an absent or faulty gene is replaced by a normal working gene. And I'm going to send this video home for you to watch. And here are the answers to your work, which I will also send home for you to check. Now, homework. The way your homework worked, I'm going to actually call everybody in here for this. So we're going to go for this. Yeah, a lot of people had questions. Okay, hey guys, can y'all come on in here? So you guys stay put where you are, because we're going to go over a couple things on the screen before we start lab, because we're going to start lab from the screen. But I also am going to go over this. So I want to go over some homework stuff before we start lab. So come in where everyone can actually come in the room. Look, everybody's here. Ozzy. Ozzy at Saba. Oh, hi. He's like, wait, everybody walked in. Say hi. You didn't know they were here. All right. So here's the way the homework, it was clearly directions weren't clear. So I went back and changed them and added some additional directions. So some of you started it early, had some issues. And then some of you started it late, were just like, I don't know what to do now. Yeah, so it's not a big deal. I grade homework on effort and if the instructions aren't clear or whatever, that's never on you. So what now? So that's what I'm going to explain. So yeah, I got it. So basically the homework, Michael, basically the way the homework worked is, okay, so what we did in lab, you guys were taking like a DNA and then you were making like the complementary RNA. So you had to know what you would build across from it, right? Like if there was an A here, then there would be a T here, but then if it was RNA, it would be a U, right? And then if there was a G here, there would be a C here. This was taking just this strand and saying if this strand of DNA has been translated into RNA already, what is it? So this translated into your mother wears a rubber band because this is start, right? ATG. So AAA, you find AAA over here, you'll see it's your, right? Your mother wears a rubber band. This is juniors. Seniors is a little different, but or your mother dresses you funny or something. I think it was your mother dresses you funny was your first one. Oh, your mother dresses you funny. I'll look at them. They were both a little different, but these are examples of how they looked. Okay. This may not be exactly what was on your homework because they were both, you had less of them and they had more of them. But this is how it worked. So we have dog breath. Okay. If any of these sentences look familiar to you, then you probably got some right. Biology is the best subject. I love rock and roll music. Okay. We are all demented puppies.
Elizabeth, I got that one because it said we are all demented puppies in the top. So then I wrote the code underneath.
Ah.
That's what I did.
Okay, that put it in wrong probably. Okay. I probably put that one in wrong. This one was DNA as a code for life.
Yeah.
This one was education is the door to the future. Well, there were different amounts. I'm just showing you examples.
Read a little every day to keep the doctor.
Right. Read a little every day. And then lastly, we are all in this together. We are all in this. Sorry, I did that because I know you guys would like. All right. So lab today. Make yourselves comfortable for a minute because we're going to do a little preview here before you start. All right. And I'm going to turn off the I'm going to end the Zoom. Bye.